Oh, what's wrong? Huh? How are you? Fine. Yes. Okay, so we're here to talk a little bit about Oscar Wilde. Victorian England was full of disease. You know, there was all this knowledge which was rapidly changing, but it was full of disease. And unfortunately, Prince Albert died in 1861, and she was heartbroken. She loved this guy. So when he passed away, her heart was broken, and she started wearing black. And she wore black the rest of her life. She stopped talking to people. She stopped going out. You know, and this is the feeling of Victorian England. It's this sadness. It's a melancholy. I mean, look at that face. There's no smile there. This is a woman who lost the man she loved. Working in factories. People younger than you, instead of this guy, instead of being in school or being in a play looking at theater somewhere, he's in a factory. Right? Because on the one hand, we have this beautiful, amazing, and revolution in industry, but on the other hand, we need people to work, including children. And look what happens in industrial revolutions. You start getting headaches. Boli mnie głowa. Na szpigułkę. Right? Na szpigułkę. This was starting in Victorian England. Look at your parents. Look at the way they work today. Right? And the headaches that they have every day. It started here. You know, it started here. Now, of course, the British Empire was growing. At the end of Queen Victoria's rule, which is, this map is from 1897, look, the British Empire was 25% of the world. 25% in population, 400 million people, 25% in land area. It was huge. It was enormous. It took a lot of energy, you know, to run this empire. Now let's take a look closer to Great Britain, and let's see what was happening specifically in London. Now, people were moving to the cities. Why? Because that's where the work was. The factories were in the city. So people were coming from the country to the city. It's like in Poland. You know, who's in the country today? Who's in the village today? The old people. You know, the grandmother and grandfather. The young people have all either, you know, moved to the city. Okay, now, Beardsley and Oscar Wilde were friends. So now we can introduce Oscar Wilde. Now let me give you some numbers before we continue. And one number is that he was born in 1854 in Dublin, Ireland. The next thing I will tell you is he studied at Oxford, which was, of course, and still is, a very prestigious school, university. Now, he married Constance Lloyd in 1884, but this was not his first love. His first love was a disappointment. He fell in love with a woman who later became the wife of Bram Stoker, the gentleman who wrote Dracula. So his heart was broken, very young, and he finally said, well, I'm going to go live in London. I'm not going to stay in Dublin. I'm going to continue living in England. And he had two sons. So, you know, from this father point of view, he was standard by Polish standards. I mean, what are we expected? In Poland, we're expected to have, what, 2.5 kids? How do you have half a kid, by the way? You either have 2 or 3, right? Half. You can't have half. Or can you? I guess you could share with your neighbor. right? You go to your neighbor and say, would you like to share a child? Oh, that's a very good idea. How do we do that? Well, I don't know. Ugh. Hey, look, it's 1945. Black and white film, you know? Black and white film. But still a pretty good horror story. Okay, so this is Oscar Wilde was done many, many times in many different places. But yes. So, what happened? Why did Oscar Wilde die so young? Let's take a look. It started with this. A calling card, a business card. Like this. Right? A card. A business card. And on this business card, we have written the following words. We have, for Oscar Wilde, posing as a sodomite. And this is the card of the Marquis of Queensberry, and I will tell you who this man was in just 1 second. Now, of course, back in the times of Victorian England, the word sodomite was the same thing as today we use the word homosexual. Now look, the word, so basically, but the card doesn't say for Oscar Wilde, who is a homosexual. He's saying who's posing, who's pretending to be a homosexual. Now, all of Oscar's friends, all of his friends, told him, his true friends, told him to take the card and do this. Did Oscar do that? What do you think? Those were different times. He didn't tear up the card. He went here. He went to a court of law. He went to a court of law like we do today. Like we don't do it, but the politicians do. This is very popular in Poland. You know, somebody says something about somebody.
Art and literature. In 1881, I published a volume of poems and afterwards lectured in England and America. In 1884, I married Miss Constance Lloyd, and from that date until now have lived with her in Tite Street, Chelsea. I have 2 sons. The elder, whom will be 10 in June, and the second 9 in November.
Okay. So these are, of course, is not Oscar Wilde, but these are the words of Oscar Wilde. And we know this because when you went to court, everything is written down. Every word is written down by the court. So we know this is what he said. And what he did was he lied. He wasn't 39. He was 41. And the lawyer on the other side knew this. And he proved in front of the jury that Oscar Wilde was lying about his age. Now look, I can stand up here and lie to you about my age. I can say I'm 42.